Flood warden schemes are really important to any community that's at risk of flooding. It provides a direct link between the Environment Agency and the community. It enables communities to get messages fast to residents, and it also gives an opportunity for the community to pass messages to us at the EA. So, for example, if there was a blockage in the river. It helps to identify the most vulnerable within the community as well, and that enables the councils to assist them if they need help. The role of a flood warden is really, really important. And although we recognise that it's tricky to get volunteers for anything, we would encourage you to get as many people as you can to volunteer to be a flood warden. The more people there are, the less pressure it is on one person, and therefore you have backup if somebody goes on holiday or are unable to carry out their role for whatever reason. The most important thing we would like to stress is that we would never want any flood warden to put their life or their health and safety in any way at risk, and that's really key to us. That it doesn't mean you have to do physical actions to be a flood warden. That's not the case.
So we are all members of the Ham Village Flood Committee. My name's Sarah Elliott and I'm the main fundraiser on the committee.
Hi, I'm Jenny Pike and I'm the treasurer.
And I'm Derek Johnson. I was a founder member of the committee.
Brilliant, thank you.
And one of the things we want to explain to you today is how for the last 20 years the committee's been operating and been focused on flood preparation and flood resilience, but now is focused on community preparation and community resilience.
I've lived in the village since 1989. We had a very bad flood in about the year 2000. And so I became, with others, a founder member of the flood group here. A few of us got together, mostly in those days, I must say, male, and it's been, I'm pleased to say these days that balance has changed, and a very good thing that's been. And we started off in a very primitive, basic way. You know, we only had what we'd accumulated between us, which didn't amount to very much. A few floodlights and a few pumps and a lot of enthusiasm. So we had trouble. You know, the village used to flood. You were marooned. We were marooned here. It flooded at both ends of the village, and we were isolated here, and we couldn't keep tolerating that, particularly as we had some older people in the village. And at that time, would you believe, you know, we were taking sandbags down through the village on rowing boats to people, because that was the only way we could get to them. It was several feet here and it was all the way up through the village. And so we did what we could with basic kit. And of course, when I look back on it, you know, it was very basic indeed. We were mounding earth, for example, on top of a road height to try and build an earth bank to stop the water coming in. I mean, and that wasn't very practical. You were trying to do that at 1 o'clock in the morning with perhaps 2 floodlights, you know, and it wasn't working very well at all. So we had to do it in a more efficient and professional way and get it more and run it better and try and get some support and get it really organized, because it had to be self-help. We could see that, you know, and we were one of the first communities, I think, in Somerset to ever start a self-help system.
And how did you move from that initial self-help to where you are today?
By lobbying mainly. You know, we decided we had to go and focus some attention on Ham. And so we did. We lobbied the EA considerably. We were talking to local authorities, the council here, who had a pump in the village which wasn't running very well. It wasn't regular, it wasn't consistent, and that was electric, and that would pack up at times when there was a power cut, so it wasn't working. So we had to get it all upgraded really and get some focus on it. And it took a bit of effort, took some effort, because we are just a small village in Somerset. I mean, all credit to the Environment Agency. They listened to us. They came along and saw it. They could see we were going to self-help. And I think that gained a response from the EA. We weren't just sitting there saying, what are you going to do about it? We were saying, this is what we're trying to do, and we're prepared to do more. Will you support us in that endeavour? And they did.
We went from having the equipment and the defences put in and taking us to that improved protected flood level of risk. But we realised really about 4 or 5 years ago we could still be at risk if any of that equipment failed. And we were encouraged by CRISP, as it was then, now Somerset Prepared, community grants to look at how we could get some equipment that we could run in the event that one or other of the pumps failed. And that really kind of galvanised us into kind of re-establishing the flood group and kind of reinvigorating it, getting some new members on.
Yeah, definitely.
And we actually then turned our eyes to the community, and we thought it can't just be a group of 6 of us. We've got to actually talk to the community, understand what their worries are, understand what their fears are, understand what kind of equipment they might have, and what could we best as a committee spend any grants towards to help supplement that level of equipment. So 2 of the things we did which have proved absolutely dynamite. The first was doing a village survey, and one of the committee members who's not here today, she went house to house through the village, asking people a fixed list of questions about their perceptions of risk. Were they worried about flooding? Did they know about it? Did they know about what might have happened in the past? What kind of preparations had they done? What kind of equipment did they have? But more importantly, what did they want from us? What did they want us to do? We had a brilliant response rate, I think 97% response rate, and over 20 recommendations of things we could do. That included equipment, but it included things like some way in which we could communicate more readily, and also social events. So that led to the second thing, which has proved so phenomenally successful, was communicating, and we set up a WhatsApp group. And we originally set it up to communicate when, for example, Lane End is flooded, which we'll show you in a bit, or to communicate when, for example, the flood sign was open or closed. But it slowly and surely turned into I've lost my parcel, I've lost my dog, your courier is trying to find you, there's a courier coming through the village. It turned into all manner of things, and it absolutely proved invaluable during COVID and during lockdown.
And because of it, earlier in the year, we had a wassail event in an orchard here in the village, and all the village got together. I mean, we had an excellent turnout. Yeah. We had the first wassail event in this village for I don't know how many years, and it's all been prompted really by the flood committee existing.
We also, as I said, had over 20 recommendations of things we could do. So we've got equipment now as a result of funding not only from Somerset Prepared, but also from Larkfleet Homes and from the National Lottery Community Fund, which was brilliant. So we raised over £7,500 in total, and we've got now 2 super duper huge pumps which we can roll out in the event that one of the big pumps fails, and we've got things like hydro sacks, hydro snakes, LED lights, flood signs, road cones, torches, high-vis. We've got some amazing head torches. We can literally blind people with these head torches. They've got all manner of settings. But this worked really well, I think. We also appreciate that we're a very small village. We are only 38 homes. In the event that Somerset has another significant flooding event, we are very unlikely to be high on the priority list. There are larger villages. We don't have, for example, a school. We don't have a care home in the village. There will be other villages that will have far higher priority than us. Not to say that we wouldn't come up the emergency, but it was so important to us to have the ability to help ourselves first, to be as resilient as we possibly could do. And we also know that there's a point where you just got to stop. If we have a plan and we have risks identified in it, and if we see the power go off, then immediately we're out here. But we know not to enter flood water, and we know to be very careful about that. But we just felt it's so important to have the equipment to be able to help ourselves as much as possible at the beginning until such time as the emergency services might be able to come and support us. So we're just as you come into Ham from North Curry end, and this is where we've got one of our 2 fixed big pumps, as we call them. This is the one that was put in and maintained by the Environment Agency, and this is part of a network of dealing with flood water, but also rising groundwater. So it does water on the road, but also water coming up. And so it's connected to a number of ditches and tracks which manage that water. So it's all funneled into 2 big storage chambers, as I understand it, under where we are. And then when the levels in those chambers reach the appropriate point, pump kicks in and it's pumped out into the river just here. And there are 2 large pipes out that pump it out into the river. It is a phenomenal thing to hear, and actually if it's a quiet night and I'm lying in bed, I can actually hear when the pump kicks in. So that tells you the kind of force that it's actually pushing the water out. I know when you open it up, it's an amazing array of buttons and lights and things, more than I could probably work my head round. But also it's connected via telephone line, I know, to the Environment Agency's main control room, and they are monitoring whether it's working. And they're very responsive, so I make sure that all the drain and grids and what have you are clear of any debris so that water can easily get into the chambers. But I have on a couple of occasions also rung the Environment Agency and said it's very high and it's not going. And they've said no, we're monitoring it, but they've also come out and kind of given me peace of mind by showing me also how it operates. So without this entry, this one way into Ham, and we are literally a one way in, one way out, we're one road through the village. Without this pump, we would be underwater here to 2 foot and you wouldn't be able to get out of the village. So this maintains our safe exit route and entry route in times of flood. So we're now in the middle of Ham village and we're at the 2nd of our fixed big pumps, and this is a pump that's been here since at least 1989. Originally Taunton Dean, now Somerset West and Taunton Council. This is a really vital pump for us. The first EA pump sorts out road access. This pump sorts out when we have rising groundwater in the ditch system throughout the village, and what this pump does is pump out those ditches out into the main river through a culvert. So this pump is maintained by the council, and the ditches and the culverts relating to it are maintained by the Environment Agency. If this pump was to go, then many more properties within the middle of the village are at risk from flooding, and some livestock, as you can hear in the background. We've had a couple of instances in this last year where the pump went from green to orange and then to red in terms of, orange is when it's working, green is when it's okay and ready to go, red is when it's not working. So orange is a great light to see because you know it's working. Red is not a great light to see, and we had a couple of instances in this last year and this last winter where we had to talk to the council, and we even had that happen at weekends, so we had to use the out of office hours number from the council. We did get a response from them. It's not an immediate response, which goes back to why we have the pump that we can bring out in the intervening time should those ditches start to fill up. But the council, to their credit, came out within working hours after the weekend and got it working again, and then kept coming back when we had that malfunction a couple of times. This for us is an absolutely crucial piece of kit. If this fails, many homes within the village are at risk.
I think it's quite a good example that shows how complex the management of water can be. So even in a small village like Ham, you have different pressures. They're coming from different places, and then different authorities that you then have to reach out to.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you've got the ditches which are really maintained by the landowners and farmers and residents in keeping them clear. You've got the piling along the river, where you've got we need to keep that maintained, and then you've got the culverts and the pumps all working together to discharge the water.
So would one of part of the group responsibility that someone will come and keep an eye on this at set points?
That's where the WhatsApp came in. People walk their dogs this way. This is quite a used. You can go over here over the bridge. You can and carry on up to Creech. So we actually got alerted by people posting through the WhatsApp that the red light was on the pump. Was that okay? Nope. So immediately we got onto the council. I think one time I was on the train going to London when I was ringing the number, having seen the picture posted on WhatsApp. So it's another really good example of how that community group means that we can keep on top of things with more than just the members of the committee. So behind me, you hopefully can see a raised earth bund going up to just behind me. That is the start of our fixed flood defences as put in by the Environment Agency, and that's where they raised the level of the land, but it continues behind me and across this way of me into a raised part of the highway. So what the Environment Agency had to do was basically dig out the highway, raise the highway, and give us this high level of protection. In 13-14, when we had the last significant floods on the levels, the water actually came up to that level of bund. So this protection, in terms of raising the level, was fundamental to us in protecting us during that flood event. So this is one of our last stops on the village. This is as you're coming in from the west, and where I'm standing now is in winter time, where flood water will start to rise as part of the flooding at Lane End. So if I turn round and show you how far that flood water is. So we'll start from here, and it will stretch in the first instance to the 30 miles per hour sign that you might see just in the back of me there. So we're approximately 100-120 metres already of flood water at this point, and we haven't even got to Lane End yet. So the last point in our tour is to see Lane End behind me. So I'm stood just by that 30 miles an hour sign that I pointed out to you earlier. So behind me you should be able to see towards Lane End. If we were in the middle of a flood incident at the moment, the water would basically be up to the top of my thighs. It would be completely impassable even to significant 4x4s. We've also got ditches either side of the road, and to be fair, it's really only a kind of 1.5 carriageway. So there are limited passing places, and as you can imagine, if it's late at night and the water's up to here and you've ignored the signs and there's no lighting on this piece, and you meet another car, if you go through, you might be able to get through, but if you meet another car or if you deviate from the trackway, you'll find yourself in the ditch. And in the last year we had quite a record of 6 cars in total finding themselves marooned.
So as a village, what have you learnt from working together in the way that you are?
We've learnt as much as possible to be prepared to look after ourselves in the first instance. It's brought us together as a community far quicker and far stronger than it probably would have done organically. We know that through having the equipment that we've applied for through fundraising, but also having our own equipment and our own skills, that we have a resilience to be able to cope at the beginning of an event. We've actually got some brilliant individuals within the village who have a unique set of skills. Makes them sound like they're from Taken. They've got a unique set of skills which they bring out. So we've got trained first aiders, defib trained users, we've got registered paramedics, we've got builders, we've got electricians. That's a brilliant network to be able to draw on at time of flood, but also at any time, just in terms of our resilience.
So quite often, as is the case, that our most important resource are people, the people that are surrounding us, and knowing who they are and to be able to call on them for help is so important.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for walking us through the village and showing us all that you've done and all that you do, and how much you are working with everybody in the village and all the agencies to make things as safe as possible for you all. You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm Gordon Swindells. I'm a volunteer flood warden coordinator at Martock, near Yeovil. The parish of Martock has a long history of flooding, and in 2013 we started a flood warden scheme. There are now 17 wardens who operate throughout the parish and also the parish catchment area, which includes the villages of parishes of Stoke-sub-Hamden, Montacute, Odcombe, Yeovil Without, which is mainly the west side of Yeovil, Brimpton, Tintnell and Ash. Also in that area is the Cartgate Reservoir on the A303, which is controlled by Highways England. During the pandemic, we have been fairly busy. The first consideration we had to think about was whether, during lockdown, the wardens were going to be covered if they went out for emergencies, which, as you will recall, was the only activity we were allowed to undertake during that particular lockdown period. Contact with the parish council insurers eventually gave us the green light, and as a result of that we then went out, but only to do emergency work. Bearing in mind that we have over 50 structures which actually control the flow of water coming through Martock, obviously during that period we did have some concerns. One of those concerns will be outlined by another flood warden, David Brett, who actually found what was a potentially dangerous situation during the pandemic. The other work that the wardens do, apart from examining and controlling the structures, is road closures. Fortunately, we have permission from the constabulary to shut roads where, in the interests of road safety, a danger is caused, and therefore it prevents vehicles travelling along the road.
I'm David Brett. I'm one of the volunteer flood wardens for Martock, and one of the areas I cover with Gordon is these Odcombe ponds. The main problem we had here was when we were getting towards the end of the winter, we had 2 successive storms. Just before we had lockdown, luckily. The first storm we were able to cope with. We filled the ponds up and let them out at the regulations so that we didn't get flooding downstream. But the second storm came fairly quickly. The land was completely saturated and there was a very high volume of runoff. So these ponds filled up very quickly. In fact, they filled up so quickly they overflowed. And as a result of that, this bank here was partly washed away. It was in danger of the whole bank, losing the whole bank and the subsequent surge downstream. So we had to take the decision against normal practice to open up the sluice and let the water out. It luckily did not have a major effect on the flooding in Martock. We just had a little bit, but nothing serious. Unfortunately, with lockdown, we were unable to get the repairs done for some time. And eventually, when we did manage to get it repaired, we were able to allow the water levels to fill up again in the reservoirs. Unfortunately, during that time, when we were trying to keep them empty, somebody unknown took it into their heads that they wanted to see water in it. We don't know who, we don't know why, but we do know there's a series of records we have which showed that the level went up and down. So somebody was shutting the valves, although they are locked off, we're not sure how they did it. At any rate, when they got over all the lockdown, the repairs had been taking place, we then were able to lay a coconut matting all across here, and it's now all been seeded. So we're hopeful that if we have more future storms, that it won't happen. Coupled with that, we've put a new larger overflow in, so it should manage to keep the levels without overtopping.
Good afternoon, I'm Marvin Collins. I am flood warden for the Loughton Flood Relief Scheme. What can I tell you? During the winter we get tremendous amount of water coming through here. In fact, where I'm standing now, I am at least 18 inches of water here, and it comes straight across over the dam if it gets blocked up. And so it's my job to come down and make sure that this fish trap that's down there is clear to allow the water to go through. But failing that, of course, the people down at Martock, it's no point me opening the sluices here to allow water through to alleviate flooding up here if Martock is up to their knees in water. So what we actually do is, when we have a flood warning come up on our radar, Gordon, the flood warden from the Martock area, phones me and gives me 2 or 3 days notice of a warning of flood, and I ask him how much water is in his rivers, and if he can take some water, then I come down here, open up the sluice which is here. This allows the water to go through. It takes about 36 hours to empty this, so that we've got a big hole, for want of a better word, here. I shut this down, and then when we get our storm, this can fill up and it alleviates any tidal wave going down to Martock or on down to the Parrot, through Thorney, Muchelney, all the way down to Hinkley Point, where it ends up, where it goes out into the Bristol Channel. One of our biggest problems now, over this last few years, just to the west of us, we used to have a railway line which was rough ballast, which of course would absorb water. Now, as you can hear a road going, cars going past us, we've got a metal road, which is a 3088. That water now runs off there straight into a drain, which goes down over the waterfall at the end of the lake here and in. So we can get tremendous water within minutes of a heavy downpour. To compound that, we've got a housing estate just being built to the southwest here, which is supposed to be 700 odd houses when it's finished. And again, that was all fields which absorb water. It now doesn't absorb water, it goes down into the drains, and guess where all that drain water comes? It comes through here.
I have found the fact that rather than being housebound during lockdown, the benefit of coming out to such beautiful places like I am now, you'd look behind me and you can see the flood storage area, and this is just one that we come to operate the sluices on, has been a great bonus. Because like most of the wardens, I'm in my senior years now. I think it's important that A, we are able to exercise in this beautiful Somerset countryside, but just as importantly, we keep the grey matter active, because that's exactly what we are doing whilst we are liaising with the Environment Agency, the Somerset Rivers Authority, the Internal Drainage Board, the LLFA, the Local Lead Flood Authority, which is of course Somerset County Council, and also, just as important, the landowners, where we have the structures actually on their land. Now, I think I've said enough for the moment, apart from the fact you might say, well, why do we do this work? Well, I've given you 2 reasons, but most importantly, it's called helping the community, which is, my view, most important. So if there's any of you out there twiddling your thumbs and you don't know what to do with your time, then please volunteer. so that you are active and, as I say, you'll keep fit, and there's also a good possibility you might live a bit longer too. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best for the future.
The reason I do volunteering is much the same as Gordon. It's helping the village and being sort of what a Martock people would call a foreigner, having only been there for 10 years. It's nice to be able to give them something back for their hospitality. It also has a lot of other benefits. We're allowed out up here in the lovely countryside, but we come as a team and we're fairly sociable people, and generally we manage to get our timing such that at the conclusion of anything we've done, it's probably opening time in the local pub, so we can have a little relaxation before we go home. And it all helps and it's all good fun. And anybody who wants to come and join, as Gordon said, please do. We'd love more. I am a little bit more senior than Gordon, and one never knows how long you can keep this going. But I thoroughly enjoy it and would recommend it to anybody else.
We do recognise that every community is different, and therefore you've seen some fantastic examples on here of Ham and Martock, and they are great. But we also recognise that every community, that might not suit them, so we will help you to tailor a plan that suits your community, and it could be something quite simple. You'll see some really brilliant information on the Somerset Prepared website, so I'd encourage you to go on, have a look through all the information that's here, and if you want any help to set up a flood warden scheme, then we're really happy to chat to you and help you create a plan that suits you and your community.